The Dale Show. Hi, everybody. This is actually the tightest together I've ever had two episodes of the show. If you've noticed, I have a different bald, bespectacled man with me this week. It's Patrick Johnston. What's your official title? Are you
I'm a
staff
sports reporter. Yeah.
writer for?
Yeah.
Do you want to say where you work or?
At the province in the Vancouver
Okay.
Sun.
Okay. Also, I asked you in a text, is there anything you don't want to talk about? But I guess we could just wait. And then if you clam up and go weird, like
When did you say that?
a
I'm looking at your
text
text
in
right
a
now.
text, like last week.
Anyway.
But anyways, the reason I ask this is
You
going to
haven't
be
mentioned anything I don't want to talk about. Let's put it that way.
Oh, okay. This is episode 36 of the Dale Show, TDS. I'm just trying out a new background. I don't know. It seems a little facetious.
It's the Dale Show background. Come on. You're the host. It's your
I guess.
show.
And it's like TDS.
I think you need to do in your background, you need to add some letters. So
I will. This is a design I did like probably 10 years ago. So I look a little younger in there. You see no wrinkles. But yeah,
it's more like it's the poofy hair that gets me.
Yeah, that was like I had a very bad hair day, and then I was just like, I'll just do it like because I had hat head, but
yeah.
It's one of those things that when you're designing, you're like, it won't show up that bad, and because you're like this close to it and you're all in, and then you zoom out and you're like, oh yeah, I probably should have changed that, and then you're like, I'm not changing that because then you'd have to like delete this whole whatever. People who design in design will know my pain. Everyone else is just like, what are you talking about? So one of the reasons I asked if you want to, or if you don't want to talk about anything, is what happened to NHL All-Star MVP John Scott, who kind of, I think, let something slip about Corey Perry that he maybe got backlash for afterwards.
Right.
On his podcast, Dropping the Gloves, he was just talking about Corey Perry being signed in Edmonton. And then he kind of, the way he said it, it almost sounded like he just assumed it was public knowledge that Corey Perry, that he got let go, bought out of his contract or terminated from Chicago for something that happened. Nobody said anything. But then John Scott says, anyways, he said that Corey Perry got fired for hitting on an NBC staffer on a trip to Columbus. And then 2 days later, he was like, I don't know why I said that. That was unfounded and I shouldn't have said that. So,
I mean, yeah, when I obviously saw what he said at first.
mm-hmm. You can say no comment if you want.
Well, I'm just gonna say I obviously hadn't heard his original comment, as it was framed. Certainly none of the, as we understood it, let's put it this way. As we understood the Blackhawks' reasons for letting him go was they very clearly underlined that there was a workplace issue, right? So an NBC staffer does not work for the team. And the issue, I think, as everyone kind of was getting their head around, was that there was something involving someone who worked for the Blackhawks. And the details, obviously, we haven't been able to, and I really can't get into that because I don't really know anything on the record.
Yeah.
Certainly you've heard noise around and things like that, but what actually happened, I mean, I don't know if we'll ever find out. But I think my impression was, from what I've heard and from sort of what people had figured out before Scott said, it seemed pretty clear that something he had crossed the line at work. The Blackhawks made pains to underline the fact that that this was a workplace code of conduct issue.
Was that just
so? Yeah. So it didn't surprise. So it did not surprise me that when Scott said this thing, which did not line up with how I think most people had understood it. And if that were the case, I think there would be a case for grievance. But as far as we know, Corey Perry has not grieved his buyout.
Yeah.
Vander Kane did, right? Like the
Mhm.
previous example of this was Vander Kane of somebody getting bought out by a team, not necessarily behaving in such a manner or being alleged to behave in such a manner. So
Yeah,
he got his money
yeah.
back, right? Like,
Yeah.
and he had his contract with Edmonton. So as far as we know, Corey Perry, I mean, Corey Perry could yet still do that. There was a
Mhm.
lot of money owed to him, but at least our impression so far is that he's not going to fight that. But that could change.
Yeah,
And
and do you think that the end, because I've been listening to like Elliot Friedman and Spittin' Chicklets
yeah,
and they said sometimes the NHLPA will appeal a decision on behalf of the player, even if the player
right,
doesn't kind of say, "Hey, I want to appeal this," but they kind
right.
of the NHLPA wants to appeal it just so that other teams don't be like, "Hey, this guy got drunk. We want to get
Right.
out of his contract and terminate it," like Campbell, for
Well, and
instance.
it's a workplace conditions thing, and this is something I
Hmm.
definitely can speak to because I've talked to the NHLPA a lot, and I've talked to the Canucks current PA guys, Ian Cole. We talk a lot about kind of issues
Oh, love
uh,
this.
and
Having
talk
an
to
insider who like
well, and I've
knows
talked,
this
I mean,
stuff.
going way back, like Bo
Yeah.
Horvat, like going way back, even Riley Stillman. I had a great conversation with Riley Stillman last year when he was a Canucks team rep.
Hmm.
In general, the PA exists to fight for workplace issues to make sure the CBA is being enforced
Yeah.
correctly, um, and no matter the situation, exactly. Like even if the player himself doesn't feel the PA may stand up and say, "Listen, this was a workplace. There are rules here," which I think goes back to to the original position taken by the Blackhawks, which was like this was
Hmm.
a work. There were workplace rules here that were violated. That's their allegation.
Can
Um,
I drop a
so
little conspiracy
you
nugget?
you could go back and say like there are legal means to fight that. They could make
Hmm.
the Blackhawks enforce that and yada yada yada. So we'll see what happens.
Can I drop a conspiracy nugget?
I
What
mean, isn't
if,
that it's your show?
yeah, that's the
I may have to
basically
swat it away, but yes,
the whole reason for the Dale show is that I just drop conspiracy nuggets
yeah,
into what we're talking about. So what I'm thinking is, like you said, that the Blackhawks, since it was a workplace thing, it wouldn't be the NBC staffer because that's a separate entity, so it wouldn't count. What if the Blackhawks were just like, this was a staffer to get it so that they could have their H and HR T's dotted and crossed, and then that they could get them, and then it turns out it was an NBC staffer?
listen, and
Does
that's
that
what
change
yeah.
things?
Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, you could go in theory if there
Mm-hmm.
was something there, um, and your lawyer and say the PA or somebody else felt it was worth your while to fight it because there was a misrepresentation. Absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
that is an avenue you could go in. But there's been no suggestion there's been any misrepresentation in that regard,
Yeah.
and the fact that Scott walked it back. I mean, I can't speak to why he said it. Maybe he had heard something, thought that's what it was, misunderstood it. It is a story that's been very carefully reported.
Yeah.
This is one of those ones where, like, um, if I'm going to talk a little bit about how the sausage get made, even this week, obviously there's the story comes out that 5 players from the World Junior team have been um,
Oh, say that. I wanna get to
well,
that
but I'm
after
just
the
going to
Corey
say,
Perry.
like,
Yeah.
I'm going to
Okay.
no. Listen, I'm going to talk about it
Yeah.
right now because we
Okay.
probably can't talk very much about it
Okay.
because
Let's talk about it right now.
well, so the reporting works is that like that comes out, but you can't until somebody's been arrested, right? You
Hmm.
cannot turn around and list people,
Yeah.
right? You
Like,
cannot
okay.
like
I was
that's
gonna
defamation.
say I have a list of 5 guys that like the Reddit detectives had put together,
Sure.
not because they have been charged, but they're the 5 guys who were at
And
the world
and that's an
at
area
the
I can't get
Canada.
into.
Yeah, the
We're just
Canada
not going to be
hockey.
able.
Should I
Yeah.
not say the
Yeah,
names?
we're just not. Yeah, for my sake, like, listen, if people
Okay,
want to
no, that's
figure,
fine.
yeah, that's what I'm gonna say. Like, if people want, they can go certainly go find that out.
Yeah.
But like, but reporting wise, there's nothing on
Hmm.
in legal terms that's happened. And so to
Oh,
go
it's
back
so
to the Perry
juicy.
story, but I'm just saying to go back to the Perry story, which we let off with,
Yeah.
like at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to.
Hmm.
Is was there a misrepresentation of the facts? Are the facts correct? And
Yeah.
if the Blackhawks did, and I don't think there's any reason to think they did, but people are right to be skeptical. You should always be skeptical.
And
Um,
with the
yeah, absolutely. That's
Blackhawks,
something that could come back up.
is this more of, going back to the Corey Perry Blackhawks thing? Is this more of a Corey Perry did something egregious enough to get fired, or the Blackhawks are just kind of covering their asses because of the whole
I don't know. Yeah.
past history of their
Well, yeah. I mean, certainly people have
problematic.
raised that point. Yeah, that
Yeah.
obviously they are very careful given how badly they handled things a decade ago.
Mhm.
Um, but with the failing having any other information about what actually happened, it's like there's just nothing. Unfortunately, Dale, as hot
Yeah.
a topic as this maybe off the top, there's just not a lot happened there, and
Yeah. I just
I think
wanted to talk
we're kind of
about
left where we're at.
Corey Perry a bit because he's making his Oilers debut. I think the game started 10 minutes ago,
Yeah,
and
today, yeah,
he's probably already scored a hat trick and
yeah.
got in a fight and pissed somebody off on the other team. And the funny thing is, it's like I was doing research on Perry because I was excited just because having an instigator on your team is
Sure.
one. It's like the troll where it's like you get a laugh that he's like seeing other players off. But it's the weird thing with Corey Perry is he's had two NHL careers. Like up until 2018 when he had his MCL surgery, he was the score guy. He
Yeah.
like did do some dirty stuff, but he like won a Hart, won a Rocket Richard. Actually, you know what? I'll just list his accomplishments because I searched it up and it makes me feel good that he's an Oiler. So in the OHL Bantam AAA Cup in 2001, I'm starting right at the beginning, minor hockey. So he was the fifth overall OHL draft in 2001.
Okay.
World Juniors Gold in
Yep.
2005. Sorry, jumped that. And then he was drafted in the NHL. First round, barely. 28th. I think there was only 30 teams back then. So
Yep.
just got in under the wire. Won the Memorial Cup. Beat Sidney Crosby to win that cup in 2005. Perry scored his first goal. Here's a little fun fact for tonight. He scored his first goal in the NHL against the Edmonton Oilers on
Yeah.
October 10th,
Perfect.
2005. Then another run in with the Oilers, 2006. The Anaheim Ducks were eliminated from the Western Conference final by the Oilers, who went on to lose in the Stanley Cup final because Rolison got a flat tire. And but then the next year he won the Stanley Cup in 2007. This is my favorite. He basically did the Connor McDavid, where in 2011 he won the Hart Trophy and the Rocket Richard Trophy. So he had the most goals and was the league MVP of the NHL.
Can I just cut you off for a second there? Which
Yep.
in Canuckland is a totally egregious MVP win. He had an incredible finish this season.
He
And for
won.
some reason,
Yeah.
the voters that year just decided that his last 20 games, whatever, he was on an unbelievable heater in the last 20
Mm-hmm.
games of the season. That mattered more than the totality of Daniel Sedin's
Yeah.
season. And also, they're like, well, Henrik won last year, and also I think, as everyone knows, the
Yeah. They're
sort of
like,
behind the scenes, the Canucks were not a loved team. So
oh,
anyway,
really? Wasn't that the year they made the
that year,
finals?
yeah, but they were just the league, they were not a popular, like as an entity. Mike
Yeah.
Gillis was not a popular guy and then the TV. That was the era where like Ron McLean, I think it was the year before Ron McLean just like decided to attack Alex Burrows on air and gave him no chance to respond. And
Really?
you don't remember
Spill the
that?
tea. No, see, my problem with NHL was I stopped being a fan
Oh, okay,
because I went to high school and there was hockey players there, and I just
right, fair
fucking
enough. Yeah, fair enough.
basically the
Anyway,
whole
carry
2018
on.
thing. And I started being a fan again in the 2011 run, but
Oh, okay,
I started being a hockey fan again in 2010 when I worked at the Calgary Sun because they would watch Flames
right,
games and Iginla
yes,
was
right,
awesome. So then it was just like it was kind of passive. And I was like, you know what, this isn't
right,
bad. And then they gave me free
right.
tickets to go see the Flames, and I was like, this sport is amazing live. And then I became a fan. And
Again,
then I jumped on the 2011 Canucks bandwagon because I fucking love the Sedins. So, like you said, it is
there you go.
egregious that Daniel didn't win because he's my favorite Canuck of all
Yeah.
time.
But you're right. I mean, he
And
scored 50 goals. That's a hell of
yeah,
a season. I mean, the guy that was peak Corey Perry
mm-hmm.
that season. That was the best season he ever had.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
and
other than winning the Stanley Cup.
yeah, or two gold medals in 2010 and 2014, and then getting back to my list, he won the IIHF World Cup in 2016, so he became the second here I have it listed. Perry is only the second player joining Scott Niedermayer to combine triple gold membership with gold at the World Junior Championships, a Memorial Cup win, and a World Cup of Hockey win.
Look at that.
Yeah. So he's
I mean, even now he's a guy like setting aside the off ice stuff.
Mm-hmm.
On ice, clearly he's been a winner, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
here's a guy you want on your side. You hate to play against him,
Yeah.
but the guy's been a winner. And you go through like that Stars team that made the final in the bubble.
Yeah.
Depth player for there, but like a guy that they needed, right? And made
Mm-hmm.
for that experience, a tough experience. Let's be clear, the
Yeah.
bubble was no fun for anybody, except for those guys who won on the very last day, and then they were all ready to go home. But
Yeah.
no, so they lost. Like Dallas lost
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, but a key player for that team. Obviously, again the next year, like the Habs made the final somewhat unexpectedly. Was a key depth player for them. Goes and plays in Tampa. Tampa didn't win in 22, but they were another top team, made the
Mm-hmm.
final. Like there's a guy that has been a useful addition to multiple cup contending teams.
Yeah.
3 years in a row. In his late 30s, he's now 38. There was a reason why the Blackhawks wanted him, right? There was a reason
Yeah.
why they signed him. It wasn't just to fill out the roster, which obviously they needed to do anyway, but it was a guy to help Connor Bedard adjust to the NHL. They're like, this is a guy
And
that matters.
and they did give him $4 million, which is nothing to sneeze at
Yep.
for a 37-year-old player.
Yep.
And
so you can understand from a playing standpoint why, and the Oilers have never been shy. Like they just don't seem to care about this kind of stuff. And they've, adding him, he's playing. I mean, that third line, he's playing with Holloway and McLeod. Like, talk about an annoying third line.
Yeah,
but
I wanted them to put him on the first line with Draisaitl and McDavid, so they could have a full Hart first line, 3 Hart winners.
Right.
Which makes no sense. Like strategically, it's just Dale's pipe dreams of hockey. Did you know that Corey Perry was actually almost an Oiler instead of a Anaheim Duck?
Oh, was this the Pronger trade?
No, when he was in the AHL, like after he got drafted 28th overall, he went and played in the AHL with Getzlaff, and then he did pretty good. I didn't write down the numbers, but during that season, the Ducks were considering trading Perry to the Edmonton Oilers for Mike Comrie. The Oilers agreed to
506. Okay, yeah. Right.
The Oilers agreed to acquire Perry for Comrie, though there was one snag to the deal. Edmonton general manager Kevin Lowe felt that Comrie should return 2.5 million of his salary. Comrie ultimately refused to do so, and the trade subsequently fell through.
Oh, crazy.
So the only reason Perry was ever a Duck was because Kevin Lowe was being like a super duper dickhead general manager and was like, hey, if we're trading you, give us money back. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
That's like that was pre the first lockout, right?
Yeah, I would assume.
Yeah, when
2003. So it was right after. It's the season before. Yeah, so contracts were a wild west then, man. Like all this bonuses and stuff. Like the only guys that can get performance bonuses now are entry level deals and guys that are now in Perry's category over 35. So so I think honestly part of the reason why they got rid of sort of deals like this was the Comrie situation, because there was I don't think, I'm not, in hindsight, I'm still not sure what the strategy was in that one. Like, what was Kevin Lowe going for? I mean, the Oilers, this was a low money, they were a low money team. We were still dealing with the Canadian dollar then. There was constant worries. I mean, this is the era where remember the Canucks were running their own. They had a lottery partnership with BCLC, and so they were taking a certain percentage of like Canucks scratch and win.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's
so
wild.
Yeah, they were just, I mean, the Canadian dollar was really low. So like, teams were very conscious of how much money's in the bank. And so, I in the end, I don't I don't recall why he would have done that, but they simply didn't have. There was no way to do that. I mean, that was something that would happen. It's funny. You look at, every once in a while I have to go look at stories from the '80s Canucks, for instance, and talking
Yeah.
about sort of salary structure and things they were trying to do. And guys would renegotiate their contracts all the time. Like it happens in the NFL. But like we
Yeah.
forget that 25, 30 years ago, players were reading like, oh, I'm holding on. I want a different deal. I'm gonna
Yeah.
hold up. And you're like, what? But they used to do that, or it used to be, at least be talked about.
And
So
this was before the cap too. And fucking
yeah,
who was the guy? He had 16 million. It was like the biggest NHL contract
Bobby
was
Holik.
actually in the 90s.
Bobby Holik. Speaking of Mike Gillis, Bobby
Yeah.
Holik. Yeah, basically Gillis built a market for him. It was I can't remember what year it was, but it was a bit of a soft free agency year, and Gillis built him into the guy, and he got this huge contract from the Rangers. And he like Bobby Holik was a good player. Like don't like the thing in all this is that like people forget like he was a really solid, big, strong, especially in that era of hockey. Like he was not a superstar. He wasn't Joe Sakic or Steve Eisenman.
Yeah, he
or
wasn't
Bure.
$16 million worth because I don't even know who
But
he
they
is.
but in the end, Gillis created this bidding war for his client, and Holik got paid well. And in many ways, people point to that as being the moment where like Gary Bettman's like, well, I have to create a system that will,
Yeah.
these guys can't help themselves. I have to make them stop.
Basically, I have to make the contracts a nanny state because these GMs just don't know.
Nanny state. Thank
Yeah.
you. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just looking over. Before we leave the NHL, how do you feel about 5 Canucks players in the All-Star
hilarious.
game? To me, that's too many. It's too many.
I mean, it shows you engagement.
Yeah.
I think what it really shows you is like fan base engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And because in the end, like obviously Quinn Hughes was selected by the NHL, and the other 4 players were a fan vote. And you look at the rest of the vote, it's Leafs, right? So Vancouver and Toronto dominated the voting, and certainly in Vancouver, like the team is playing really well. Fans are engaged, fans are jazzed, like they're interested in it, and that's to me a statement of that's what it is. Like you're absolutely right. Like the Canucks have had a great year, like that.
Yeah.
No one is arguing that, but there certainly have been, I would say, more kind of long-term dominant teams.
Yeah. Who weren't dog shit last year?
That have would say sort of on long-standing reputation would make more sense to send 5, send such a large percentage of the NHL roster. I mean, it's going to be fun, like because there's a draft this year. I mean, I'm not usually a big All-Star game guy, but there's some interest in around it, and the way the draft's going to work, like these guys are going to end up in different teams, and and it's gonna be all right. Rick Tocchet's going. He's I think he's kind of. I mean, I asked him about the other day, and I was just like, "Can you believe you're an All-Star coach?" And he goes, he did. It's not about me. I'm just happy for Mike. I mean, it's recognition. Our team's playing well. I'm honored that we're being recognized. Like the players are being recognized.
Is he coaching? Do the coaches have specific?
I don't. To be honest, I haven't actually. I don't know that part.
Red.
There's 4 coaches.
Oh, how about these jerseys? The yellow on yellow jersey, like
it's All-Star. They're
I
all
care. I'm a design
Look
guy.
at there's a thing that went around. There's a graphic. I think the NBA put together. LeBron has made his 20th All-Star game.
Yeah,
and they basically did a montage on Instagram of like his All-Star career, and it's hilarious seeing how like year to year, like the NBA All-Star jerseys, how much they've changed.
Yeah.
And format and whatever. And like some years they're futuristic and some years they're throwback and some years you don't even know what they are. And like, the NHL tends to go with sort of local colors or some sort of local designer or something like that. Like, I don't know. I mean,
the Bieber designer Drew House.
It's cool. Like, I've seen, every once in a while you'll see one of the All-Star, like you'll see a Pettersson All-Star jersey outside Rogers Arena or something like that. Like a fan wearing one. And that's kind of cool. It's good to see. And then you're like, that's all right. Like the year it was Pettersson and Hughes both went, and there was the like monochrome, like black and white.
San Jose. I think that was
that 17, San Jose? I thought it was St. Louis, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. But that you see those, you're like, but I really like the ones they had in Florida last year. Like that had the
the star.
The
That
star, the hilarious old star, but like the light blue with the kind of sky orange and like
yeah,
just
and the
very
pink.
tropical kind of.
Yeah, I do like those
Yeah,
those tone
those
covers,
are.
and they're very topical for right
But
now
yeah,
for like
whatever.
vaporwave
I've
style.
barely even processed. Here, I'll get them up right now.
Yeah.
Apologies for typing. NHL
So
All
the
Star.
problem for me was as a design point, you can't just put yellow on yellow. Like it just looks
Well,
like
yeah, here you are.
it's
You're
gonna
the
all
designer.
bleed
I'm deferring to
together.
you.
Yeah. So you don't want to put yellow on yellow because as soon as you're like if you're looking at this on TV, the colors are gonna bleed and the yellow on yellow is just gonna look like a mishmash and it's gonna be hard to tell what's going on. Plus, I
So
don't know. Yeah,
here's the
sorry.
interesting. I'm just looking at it now. So they obviously needed two light colors, two darker colors.
Hmm.
I am surprised that they've got blue and red lined up just for. I mean, blue I guess isn't green, just for color blindness stuff. Like color blindness stuff, actually, they think about this stuff now.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know what else you would do though. Could you make it silver and white? Is that enough contrast? Like white and yellow, there's contrast. Like the
Yeah.
challenge if you're having a round robin and you don't quite know how your teams are going to match up.
Yeah. So
Um,
what I would do is what colors are there? There's blue, yellow,
red,
red, and
and white.
white.
Yeah.
They could have just gone black, but with the yellow,
No,
they
but
could have.
the yellow is the problem. Like the
Yeah,
yellow, so you go white, red, blue. That's straightforward, and then you
yeah.
could have done black. But like, I don't know if there's enough contrast.
And the way to save the design was you make because it's like what the I should pull this up because it's the NHL shield, then stars,
A
right?
big star, yeah, a bunch of
So they
stars.
should have made the NHL like shield silver, and then the yellow stars wouldn't be bleeding in with the yellow NHL shield.
Oh,
And
I see.
then
Yeah. So the problem's the logo. It's not the jersey color. It's the logo.
yeah, it's the logo because you have yellow on yellow,
Yeah.
which
Why
is
wouldn't you make it
terrible.
silver?
Yeah, or even put like a white outline around the star to the black
No,
to
but
make
I
like
think you're
double.
right though. I think if you do
Yeah,
silver, silver, you solve your problem. What the
because
heck?
the NHL
Does Drew House not
shield
like
is
silver?
silver in real.
Does Drew House not like silver? Actually, is it no? The NHL Shield is are usually silver.
It's silver now. It
Oh
used
yeah,
to
it
be
is. That's right.
gold.
Yeah,
It
you're
used to
absolutely
be
right.
like
No,
orangey
it
gold, like
used to like burn
bronze,
orange or something. Yeah.
copper. I think copper.
Yeah, you're right. Copper. That's right. It used to be copper. Right. It's
Mm.
silver. Yeah. What the heck are they doing?
And it's funny because most people don't notice this stuff, but me being a designer, I'm like, oh,
Yeah, it is. Well,
yeah.
that's what makes you special. That's why we love you.
You know what would have been awesome was if they had like stripes or something. Oh, and also I do
Well, you
like
know what the problem is? Is Drew
what?
House a yellow star? Like, is he a big yellow? He's a big yellow logo guy. That's the
Yeah,
problem.
and because when they designed the reverse retros for the Leafs that were reversible and you could turn them inside out, the Leaf was
Oh,
yellow. So that's
oh,
probably
I didn't
just
know
like
that.
the
I didn't know
designers.
that.
Remember, like it had like the leaf with
Oh
the two
yeah,
eyes
right.
and then the happy face.
I'd never
Yeah,
picked up on that.
yeah.
Okay.
I didn't actually pick it up until right now when you said, "Is this guy a big yellow guy?" And I was like, "Oh
Well,
yeah, that
wait.
last
So what
logo
were the
was
Bieber
yellow."
ones?
Well,
Because
he's friends with Justin Bieber, and Justin Bieber touches tips with Austin Matthews. So Bieber kind of introduced him to the Leafs. So Bieber's the connection between the Leafs and Drew House. I think that's what it was. Or
no,
it's
no, that makes
just,
sense now. Okay, I got it. I got it. I got it.
yeah.
I got it. Maple Leafs
And
when you
Drew,
meet
and
next
like
gen
when
uniform.
I think when Bieber had that Tim Hortons line of stuff, like of materials, like he had a corduroy fanny pack and stuff. I think Drew House designed those as well.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, I see it now. I'm just looking at it right now. I just hadn't put that together that
Mm.
it was all like I thought it was just I was like, oh, Bieber design stuff. No wonder it looks so silly.
Big red line. That's a
Anyway,
conspiracy attachment.
yeah. Look at that. People are already enthralled.
I gotta pull my what else was I gonna say? Oh, I do like the stripes on the arms, how it has the three Adidas stripes and then like two kind of
Sure,
floating stars. But that works
sure.
because it's not
Oh,
yellow
the All Star
stars on the
jersey.
yellow
Yeah,
logo.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean,
Sorry.
I'm as All Star jerseys go, I'm actually kind of all right with these ones.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, they're cool designs for kids and stuff. The only thing that bugged me, as I've
they
said
look
100
cool.
times, is
They
the
would look
yellow on
cool
yellow.
on. They'd look cool in a video game.
Oh yeah, definitely. Or
Yeah,
like a cartoon,
yeah.
like the Pro Stars. Yeah.
Anyway, here we are, the Pro Stars. There you go.
Um, what else? Oh, I don't want to leave yet. So if we're talking about that, like, do you okay? This is what I wanted to say. Conspiracy wise, there's this big conspiracy with the NHL on how Gary Bettman doesn't want a Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup, which if I was a conspiracy person, which I am an enthusiast, and I was actually going to give this theory big, like give it actual ground to be like validation, I would be like, if Gary Bettman doesn't want a Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup final, why is there constantly a Canadian team in the finals? Like it's like
well, because it keeps your interest. I mean, I think listen, I think the NHL as a general rule, yeah, knowing how things work for them in their various markets.
give
The
me the
Canadian markets,
goods.
but just think about the Canadian markets are steady and reliable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's less the marginal advantage of having a Canadian team winning the Stanley Cup is not that big. Those fans are going to be
Mm-hmm.
that jazzed no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
The gains you can make, at least in the 1 year sample of, say, the Florida Panthers making the Stanley Cup final, in
Yeah.
terms of the sort of metrics and quote unquote, fan totals,
Yeah.
there's a bigger relative difference if you're getting teams that aren't necessarily a big deal in their markets most of the year versus the Canucks or the Leafs or the Habs making the final, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that juice is like you're trying to bring new fans, find the casual fans, blah 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 blah, and you've already kind of got you've got a captive audience in the
Yeah.
Canadian teams basically, and you're trying to build a captive audience in Florida, in Vegas, wherever.
That's a good point. Like
Yeah,
that's
like
why Tampa
which
Bay won
listen, like that's
twice.
the marketing business answer. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, I think there is in a way something to that,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think they're building it out to make it more difficult. I think in the end we've just had a bad patch of management, and like it's not like Canadian teams have, as you said, haven't played in the final. Like there have been plenty of opportunities. Like the Flames probably should have won in hindsight in 2004. Like
Mm-hmm.
the
Like let's
Oilers
go
made
through
no
the
sticks.
list
Like
quickly for those NHL
since the
people.
Habs won in '93, you had the
Yeah.
Canucks in '94,
Yeah.
right? You had, I mean, you had the Leafs make some late runs, but never make it to the final. You had the Flames in '04.
Yeah.
You had the Oilers in '06.
Yeah.
You had the Canucks in 2011. Or wait, you had the set. When were the Senators in the final? Like 2013, something like that. The Sens made
Yeah.
it.
I don't remember. You're the hockey. You're supposed to know all this stuff. You're the adult on the
The
podcast.
Stanley Cup final was
I'm
07.
the dick
Oh, so
joke
that's right,
guy.
'07. So they lost the dog. So
Okay.
the Senators are '07. They lost. Then you have the Habs in 2021.
Yeah.
Or yeah, and we've already got the Canucks in 2011, right? We already have that.
Yeah. We
Yeah,
already
so
got those.
you've
So it was
had
a
six.
10-year gap. Okay. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, so you've
So
had
yeah,
six.
6 in the last 30 years, which representational wise of like 30 teams and then 32 teams, that's
Right.
about right. You'd have 6
Yeah.
overall from Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think that if it was a conspiracy, it would be kind of harder to like hide in the NHL the way fans pay hyper attention to calls and the refs and stuff. And it is a subjective on how refs can call different games harder. Like that one guy who got caught on a hot mic who was
Tim
saying,
Peel. Yeah.
yeah, somebody got a penalty, so they're going to make it up to kind of
Right.
even it out and stuff.
Right.
And it's funny because if there is actually a conspiracy in the NHL, it's to just make everything fair and each team as even to the other teams as possible. Like when you see like that term, teams playing down to other teams, like for instance, my Oilers, how they had so much trouble beating Chicago when Chicago doesn't even have Bedard. And it was like kind of like pretty close. You could say,
Yeah.
as a conspiracy wise, like sometimes the players will go, oh, we're playing Chicago. They're like second last in the league. We're going to take it easy. We're not going to put in full effort because we have 82 games in the season. We don't want to wear ourselves out. But then you could also say, hey, maybe does the league say, hey, don't fucking blow out Chicago. They're an original 6 team. Yeah, they don't have Bedard, but they're going to be our cash cow for the next however many years that we have Connor Bedard, which could also be another reason why Corey Perry was just shot off into the sunset because the league would have stepped in and been like, hey, Chicago's going to be one of our major brands coming up, which you think they would want to change their logo or something.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just a side note that crept in. Yeah. Well, there's another thing. How long do you think Chicago gets away with having an Indian face as their logo
It's
or a
America.
First Nations
It's
face?
America. They just don't operate the same way. Like they just don't think about that stuff.
Yeah, but
It's
they got the
unfortunate.
Redskins and the
Yeah, but that
Cleveland
was more, that
Indians.
was so obviously egregious. Like I think,
Yeah.
like, and obviously the Cleveland Indians changed it. Like the Blackhawks, sure, it could happen.
Mhm.
Um, I think the difference is that there's no caricature. I
Yeah.
mean, obviously it's sliding scale stuff. They're using what is sort of claimed to be a traditional emblem.
Mhm.
Um, they have lukewarm endorsement from some First Nations in the U.S.
Yeah.
Listen, it could change. It could very well change.
Mhm.
Everything, you never say never. 10 years from now, could they have a completely different logo? Yeah. Um, I,
Like
change. I mean, it is that Hemingway quote, right? Like change happens slowly then quickly. Like maybe
it's a
we'll
good
find
point.
ourselves all of a sudden it'll be boom, it'll be done, right? We'll have talked about it for a long time. I never say never. I just look at how the kind of conversation around that logo compared to the other logos
Yeah.
has not. I mean, there is a movement obviously there, and I think I personally think they should do something different? Yes, I think they should. I think they should. If they really want to do that, they got to go authentic. They're going to, have to change it. They do claim they're named after an actual U.S. Army regiment, not after any particular, or well, the
That's
U.S. Army regiment, which
wishy-washy.
drew the name. It's wishy-washy, absolutely,
Yeah.
right? But like, so I don't think they're going to go in there and put a tank on there or anything like
Yeah. I
that.
think one of the
Is there a
reasons
way
they
for them to do something different and engage with First Nation communities? Absolutely. Am I convinced they're going to? I'm pretty
could
skeptical.
easily just get like a hawk, like the animal pitch head on there.
A Black
And
Hawk?
we've seen mock-ups on that. I think one of the reasons they've gotten away with it this long is unlike the Indians and the Redskins, their name itself wasn't
Yeah,
racist because them it was they dropped the name first and then they changed their logo. Like with the
yeah.
Cleveland Guardians,
That's right.
they retired Chief Wahoo, which was the name of the
Yeah,
caricature, and then they were just Cleveland Indians, and then they changed their name to the Guardians,
yeah, yeah.
and then
Well, and as people pointed out, like if you changed out the sort of ethnic background of the of the of the Chief Wahoo logo and made it a different ethnicity, like you would
yeah,
never tolerate that. So how does this any different?
yeah,
But yeah, listen, like if you, I mean, in a similar terms, if you took the Blackhawks logo and made it a similar image of a different ethnicity, I'm not sure we're putting up with that as well, right? Like,
hmm
that might be the standard that really we should be talking about. So, yeah, well, we'll see. Like, it's not something you hear a lot about, but like there have been pushes and movements to change it. So, I mean,
yeah,
like I said, never say never.
and it is also a like point of contention where they don't want to change it because they're an original six team, and that's been their logo for like 100 years.
That's to me that's
But
hogwash. I mean, the
yeah,
Blackhawks have changed the current uniform. The fact it's been this uniform, which has
yeah,
been what they've had since the '60s, is actually really unusual for the Blackhawks. Like they used to change all the time. Remember in the '90s they had those black jerseys and they wear it all the time. And like, you know, the
yeah,
truth of the matter is that the Leafs have changed their uniforms lots. The Bruins have changed their uniforms lots. The Rangers have kind of gone back and forth to what they have now, but they have had other looks, right?
hmm
The only, and even the Blackhawks have tweaked theirs historically. Have tweaked theirs. The only teams that really have never done anything different, or haven't done anything different in years, are the Red Wings. The Red Wings have been the longest time. They've had that logo since the '30s, I think.
yeah,
The Habs have had the logo and the color scheme since the beginning. They fiddled at times with, especially with the alternate, with their second white sweater.
hmm
But and I think, I mean, people forget this, but 20 some years ago, there was discussions about that they were going to start getting goalies to wear like soccer style, like different uniforms.
Oh,
But what
really?
they've
I never
landed on,
heard
but
that.
what they've landed on, yeah, there was. I remember those years ago. But what they've landed on, and and I think the NHL's kind of figured it out, is that they've landed on, well, everyone can have their basic set, and then we can have
Yeah,
special items. So you can wear metallic blue helmets, chrome. The Canucks
yeah,
have their updated third jersey, which is the skate jersey.
hmm
On and on and on and on. So Yeah,
Yeah.
I change. Like I said, I would not. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if they changed it. Um,
Mhm,
I can see why perhaps it's different. It has been different to date than the other ones that have been changed.
mhm.
Um, I'm sure there'll be a lot of really positive conversation if they decide to do it.
Yeah,
Really,
there's gonna
really
be
insightful, honest discussion about it,
a lot of allies in the online fan clubs chats.
or not.
Yeah, I was being
I'm sure
sarcastic.
Rogan.
Yeah.
I'm sure your guy Rogan's going to weigh in on it with
Yeah,
lots of facts.
he would have to actually know what the sport of hockey is before he did that.
Oh, I'm sure he'd say something. Anyway,
Um, yeah.
we're done with the NHL. I think we're done with the NHL, aren't we?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the Pride tape thing or no? It's kind of yeah. Let's not.
No, because the
Because
NHL backtracked. Like players can
yeah.
use it. So like,
Well, they kind of didn't backtrack. They just never enforced it and then never talked about it again.
oh,
Unless you're aware of some like presser where they're like, okay, we're backtracking.
no, I think it became clear it was just a ridiculous thing to deal
Mm-hmm.
with because
Yeah.
it went with what they were saying the whole time, which was player choice.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Yeah.
let's not talk about it.
Okay, let's move on from the NHL.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Super Bowl conspiracy. Have you heard about this?
Yeah.
About how the Super Bowl logo. Oh, I should pull it up so I know. I think I had it in my note. No, I have the picture in my phone. So tomorrow is what's it called over there? Because it's not. Is it the conference finals in football as well, or do
Yeah.
they call it something
Yeah.
different?
Yeah. It's the AFC and NFC
I'm
conference
so
finals.
good with sports.
Let's have a sports podcast, not know anything about sports.
Hey, I could talk about anything I want. It's my show. God damn it. I'm so off. Where did I put this?
Yeah. So no, here I'm looking
Oh,
at it right now.
here I got the
So it's
pass.
basically saying the colors in the logos have predicted the teams in the
Three
last.
different times. Yeah. So what we're talking about is Super Bowl LV3. What's the actual
63.
number?
63.
63.
Sorry, 58.
58. The logo came out and it had purple and red. So everybody like I the first time I heard it was about a month ago where they're like, well, obviously that means that San Francisco 49ers and
Yeah.
the Baltimore Ravens will be the two teams since it's in those colors. And then someone to further the conspiracy, someone let it slip that they were like, hey, did you hear that they announced Reba McEntire is going to play at the San Francisco Baltimore Super Bowl? And then that was just kind of like a screenshot of a text that popped up in Reddit. So who knows the validity of it? And then
Well,
people's
there was also this thing on CTV News Vancouver Island. You know about this? That when they're like
no,
Chiron, they're like ticker at the bottom. The other
yeah.
day, they obviously they made some reference to like the 49ers being in the Super Bowl, but it was clearly the person didn't understand that the games this weekend weren't the Super Bowl. But
Oh,
nonetheless, people laughed about it.
yeah. And what we mentioned before, I'm just looking at the picture right here. You can't really see. Yeah.
That's
Okay.
really professional, though.
Hold up my phone and it just blanks out my whole face.
Yeah, you should have made it your background. Is what you should have done.
Oh, yeah. Well,
If you
anyways,
were prepared.
so Super Bowl 37, which was or 57 last year, which was Philadelphia Eagles versus Kansas City Chiefs, had green and red. But it's like it's so annoying because if you look at it, like how many teams have the color red? Because they're everybody's like conspiratorial truth for these last three Super Bowls. One of the colors is red three times, and it's three different teams. Like how
Yeah,
many NFL teams have
yeah.
the color red? The
Okay, debunked.
purple,
Done.
the purple, yeah, you could kind of say is Baltimore.
Vikings.
Yeah. Oh, good call, Pat. But I guess so. Yeah.
Debunked.
And what is it tomorrow? It's the Lions versus the
Lions in San Francisco, and the Chiefs in Baltimore.
yeah. And for me, if I was gonna have a conspiracy, oh, let's talk about the Taylor Swift conspiracies I've heard about. If I'm having a conspiracy, it's gonna be Kansas City Chiefs. But then you
Well, because
can't,
you want her around as much as possible.
yeah, and you want Taylor Swift, who's bringing all those eyes on the whole
Yep.
thing. Have you ever heard of the term Google hacking?
Yes, it's
Well,
what
it's
we all
like,
do.
well, yeah, it's like when like one of the conspiratorial ideas is that Taylor Swift inserted herself into the NFL so that every time you talked about Taylor Swift, it would bring up
Right.
like her and the Chiefs instead of like
Yeah.
her carbon footprint on the private jets that she takes to
Yeah.
all of her
Right. Right.
concerts, which I don't think people actually care about
No.
famous people on their private jets. They're just like, we have to go after the little guy to get them to fall in line with their carbon footprint. Otherwise, they would be paying attention to what's going on right now in the Middle East, where ships are sailing around the Horn of Africa and adding 2 weeks to a container ship journey that is burning that much more carbon. So people obviously don't care about that conspiracy. So I'm just putting that aside. But if I was a conspiracy and I was the NFL, I would definitely have the Chiefs in the finals for the Super
Right.
Bowl, which is another team that should probably change their name. Just change it to Kansas City Chefs.
That's a classic.
Yeah.
The chefs.
Let me see. Okay. Do you want to talk about Sports Illustrated? This is my last
Yeah.
topic I had
Let's
prepared.
finish up with that. That's a good one.
Okay. I did go over it a bit last week, so I don't want to like hammer it home, but I did look up more stuff because one of the problems was that what is it? Authentic Brands Group, which is the company that owns Sports Illustrated, had rented out the basic like the licensing to Arena Group so that they could run and have the thing. And then they had to make $4 million payments or $3.5 million payments. And I'm not sure if that was monthly or annually, probably monthly for how big of a brand it was. And the Arena Group had missed a payment. So
Yeah.
Authentic Brand Group was like, you have to give us $43 million or you can't have the Sports Illustrated license anymore. And then Arena Group just laid everybody off. And so right now it sits where it's like nobody knows what's going on. Is Arena Group gonna pony up the 43 million so they can continue to make Sports Illustrated, or is Authentic Brands going to license it to someone else? And the thing I was curious about this was like, well, when did Authentic Brands get it? And they got it in 2019. It was sold to them from this thing called the Meredith Group or
The
something
whole thing's terrible. The whole thing's
for
terrible. Let me cut you
110
off.
million.
The
Let me
whole
just
thing's terrible. All
just
right.
the selling. Okay, so in 2019 it was sold for 110 million
Yeah.
to the Authentic Brands Group, but in 2018 it was sold to Meredith from New York Times Inc. And I think that was the first company that owned it from the 50s or wherever when it started. Okay,
Right.
that's the timeline. So basically, Sports Illustrated was sold from Times Inc. to Meredith in 2018, and then a year later it was sold again to
Right.
Authentic Brands Group. And the reason I
Right.
brought this up last week was it's just an example of the bad parts of when kind of hedge fund groups like Authentic Brands, like they own Reebok, they own
Yeah.
Elvis's estate, they own Tap Out, they own all these other brands. So it's like you get like a whole bunch of investors and then you just start buying up IPs and then their profits kind of pay off the like board members. So it's like the profits from these companies kind of act
Yeah.
as like stock dividends type of deal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, it's I would say the biggest issue in well, one of the biggest issues in sort of modern capitalism is these
Mm-hmm.
guys who just roll around with a bunch of money and get to throw it at whatever they want, don't have any particular interest in the business,
Mm-hmm.
and
Like,
just want to and just see if they can, and it's just not good. There's no interest, like, and the underlying stuff in the Sports Illustrated case, which is true for many media cases, many media companies,
mm-hmm.
um, journalism, what have you, which is that everything started shifting 20 years ago, and they almost across the board were terrible at reading the room and where things were going.
Mm-hmm.
And as many have pointed out, it is absolutely mind-boggling that Sports Illustrated, which was the biggest sort of label in North American sports media, right? Like they
Mm-hmm.
did the magazine, all the stuff in the magazine. They did all this video. Like they were a huge brand.
Yeah.
Partnering with CNN at one point. Like they completely and utterly collapsed into this brand that was being kicked around a bunch of investment groups, just kind of
Yeah.
as a label, not caring about whether it actually was worth what they could do, and that the business itself was so badly managed that it is collapsed as badly as everybody else. Media is hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
The media business is harder than ever, and it's because the advertising market collapsed. The money you make online advertising is just not what it was compared to what it used to be in print.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a reason why everybody's trying to sign up subscribers, because in the end that's a stable, reliable source of funding. But even compared to how much money used to be in the system before, like everything's tied up in Google, Facebook.
Yeah.
Those guys figured it out. Regulators didn't understand what was happening until it was too late. So you have these advertising monopolies, and that the broader market share has just become a disaster. Like nobody makes any money. So, and then you have guys come and think they can make money, and it only gets worse.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's really sad. Sports Illustrated obviously was a huge brand, huge company, huge name. They drove the conversation for so long. I mean, things change, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
inevitable. Don't get me wrong. Things are going to change. Maybe it was inevitable they were going to change anyway. But the way they changed is what's really depressing in all this. Is that
Yeah.
it wasn't about the journalism. It wasn't like people weren't reading. It was
Mm-hmm.
about guys making bets on the finances, and on and on and on.
Yeah. The one of the problems is like for me, because I was marginally in the print industry, like I worked for the Calgary Sun and stuff. And the thing that always boggled my mind was you go from an industry like print journalism and print media, which is it has so much overhead because you have to print everything. So, like the Calgary Sun would have its own printing press in the
Yeah.
same building. So, you have all the staff, and then you got to get these physical papers to somewhere. And they still made more money than they do when you get rid of all that. And I guess the whole thing was someone had explained it to me years ago where it was when online news started, print journalism was like, well, that's just a trend, a fad. So we're not going to worry about that. So they kind of lowballed advertising and stuff and didn't set up the precedent. And then, like Patrick said, by the time they realized what had happened, it was too late. And uh, I was going to ask you a question. You know how Canada started that? What was it, Bill C-13 or wherever, where like Facebook can't advertise Canadian news stories without giving them some of the advertising revenue because the Canadian government was like, look, Google and Facebook and these companies have made so much money off of their advertising dollars that they put right below, like, say, a Sports Illustrated article. So if Google has a link for Sports Illustrated, like you Google something and Sports Illustrated comes up and there's an ad above it, Google just makes all the money for that ad, but the only reason you're there is the Sports Illustrated
Right.
article. So
Right.
Canada was like trying to claw back some of that money by making it so Facebook had to go to arbitration with these companies. Like say let's just for the sake of argument say that Sports Illustrated was Canadian. Facebook
Right.
would have to go to arbitration with Sports Illustrated to like give that so they both those companies could figure out the payment of what Facebook would have to give Sports Illustrated as a percentage of the advertising revenue. And of course, somehow everybody like the right wing turned this into fucking Justin Trudeau is trying to censor the news and stuff. And then the
Right.
other interesting thing was they could have started enforcing this last December. That's when the bill came out and like became a law or something. But they kind of never started enforcing it because you could still Google Canadian articles and stuff unless behind but you figure that if Google would have gone to like global news and gave them a certain amount of money, we would have heard about it by now.
Right.
So what I think is what happened from the Facebook pullback lashback, because what happened was Facebook said we're not doing this, f you guys, and then Chorus, the company that is the parent company of Global, was like, well, we're pulling all our advertising off Facebook if you're gonna like not give us like money, kind of like, you're not going to give us the money back. And then Facebook was like, fine, if you're pulling your advertising, we're going to pretend this is actually in effect right now, and we're not posting any Canadian articles, and you can't post Canadian news on Facebook. And then so everybody like thought that the conspiracy is that the Canadian government is trying to censor news and stuff. Do
Mm.
you So the end of my question is, do you think Sports Illustrated and other companies like that in the States should try to claw back advertising money from Google?
I mean, at the end of the day, like any money that comes back to my company is a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not sure. I mean, some of the language around it felt like it was a misunderstanding of how the internet works.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
listen, I support legislation that basically tells Facebook and Google, listen, you guys can't just keep doing what you've been doing.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think it's perfect legislation and in the slightest, but at the end of the day, Google's agreed to it, right? I mean, Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why you can't click on news links in Canada on Facebook is because Facebook just doesn't care anymore. They didn't want to be in that. I don't think they want to be in that business anymore anyway.
Yeah.
Um, Google recognizes the value, obviously, that I guess we bring to their search traffic. I'm not really sure, but in the end, they agreed, and so we're not going to get the pile of money I think that people had hoped we would, but similar to what happened in Australia, like
Mm-hmm.
Google and Facebook blinked in Australia, and they ended up agreeing to these fees. Um, we'll see where this goes. I mean, fundamentally, people are reading. Like people keep wanting to see that, like what we do. They come to our websites. They're interested in that. I
Mm-hmm.
think the way people consume news is shifting. Obviously, kids use TikTok and stuff like that, and you start seeing a lot more people talking news stuff on TikTok,
Yeah.
on Instagram Reels. I'm still trying to figure that out myself, like how I'm going to do that in my role. But that's definitely something there. Um,
Oh, you
you
mean like
certainly,
do a Patrick Johnson TikTok or
I don't
convince the
know.
province to have a TikTok?
One or the other, but but it's also like, how do we actually like? How does that work out for us? Like, there's like
Mm-hmm.
you can make money on TikTok, obviously.
Well, the
Um,
problem with TikTok is to make money off TikTok. I don't think you can in Canada because I was talking to I think because my sister used to have like, she has dogs and she used to have a pretty large TikTok following and she would get a whole bunch of views. And I was like, have you like monetized this at all? And she said you couldn't really do it in Canada with like whatever. I don't know if that's still the way it
anyway,
is, but I was like, oh yeah.
yeah.
And then the other thing too is, have you heard anything about the CanCon online stuff that they're trying to push through? That was kind of like a sister bill to the C13, where
Right.
they're trying to make like YouTube and TikTok, if they're going to be in Canada, they have to go by the same sort of standards
Yeah, I
as the
mean, this goes
radio.
back to like I said, there was just people didn't understand what it was, and I certainly
Mm-hmm.
think yes, like there is an element of protecting Canadian culture and Canadian values and Canadian ideals, because so much of tech is driven by there's a particular type of sort of American libertarian thinking that drives that is
Mm-hmm.
attuned to the way a lot of sort of programmers and tech type people think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that I don't personally agree with that mentality, um, but I do think it is important to recognize the cultural space that these operations inhabit, and the way they operate should reflect what we think is important in Canada. And you look at the
Mm-hmm.
rise of some of the American style protests, resistance, the sort of the MAGA type mentality, and a lot of that's because of stuff that's just getting dumped over the border. That 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when all we had was cable TV, it was hard. You couldn't do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, okay, sure, free speech, great, I get it, but like, there's a difference between free speech and without consequence and free speech with consequence. And
Mm-hmm.
you certainly are allowed to say what you think, but if you are saying shitty things, you should be known that you're saying shitty things.
Yeah.
Like freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequence. And so that's the challenge I think we're now at, because YouTube, the way their algorithms work, like there's a lot of scary stuff out there.
Mhm.
And there's a big picture question here. I am skeptical that we'll figure out how to deal with that. But yeah, like there should be more Canadian stuff visible to Canadians on YouTube. Like if people are
Yeah.
consuming things, there has to be a way to do that. And like, um, I mean, obviously, if that becomes some kind of restriction or there's some kind of, some sort of thing that has to be added to the algorithm, YouTube fights it, whatever, I don't even know. Of course, people are going to find their ways around that. They always have. That's reality.
Yeah.
But the broad public, I think, deserves to have reasonable, fair exposure to things,
Mhm.
and have a conscious connection to the choices they're making,
Yeah.
and that's the danger of social media. The danger of algorithms in general is that people end up giving away that choice with one click of a button. Um, and yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
people should not. People should the the choice that people made when they watch one thing shouldn't lead automatically to another thing.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the danger we've run into with all these kind of tech driven things in our modern life. And I'm interested to see where things go from here.
Yeah. Have
I'm,
you
I hope we go in a good direction, because where we are
Yeah.
headed right now is scary.
Yeah. Have you thought about kind of not, I don't want to say exploiting, but maybe taking advantage or utilizing this whole CanCon thing with like trying to make
Well, I mean, I'll
Canadian
say this, like,
news content on
this isn't
YouTube?
necessarily a CanCon thing, but like, like we produce good YouTube content,
Yeah.
and then there's these guys out there who are just content farming their own crazy ideas, and they show up, and that's what people are getting on YouTube. And I'm like, these guys don't know what
Yeah.
they're talking about. So what are we
Mhm.
even doing here? Then, and that's a frustrating thing. Like that is something that, to me, like the knowledge and authority that hockey reporters bring, like that are doing this for a job, like
Yeah.
that should be something that YouTube is able to pick up on. And instead,
Mhm.
it's like who can post the most and yell the most, and that's not good for anybody.
Yeah. Cool, cool.
Anyway,
That's
on
it.
that dour note,
It's all going down. No, I think I actually feel like in general, the whole like news conspiracy bad. I feel like we're turning a corner as a society, and we're kind of realizing that taking off regulations and taking our hands off the wheel was kind of a bad choice. So I think like with the Bill C-13 as an example, we're kind of like brainstorming on ways to kind of not maybe put the toothpaste back in the tube, but maybe kind of use the toothpaste better. I don't know how to finish this analogy, but I feel like the people in charge of rules are starting to realize what the whole reason we have rules in the first place is because, yes, it may seem nanny state-ish, but everything you do that's a nanny state stops your kid from hurting itself. So
well,
basically,
there's
yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's responsible, I mean, peace, order, and good governance, right? Like
Mhm.
that's the fundamental idea, that responsible government, like that responsible government mean that we react to what people want, right?
Mhm.
Not just that we're responsible, but like the idea of good governance, like that we are doing what is right for the whole. And
Yeah.
that is a value that I think is Canadian versus American.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I think consciously working towards improving that situation online is, I think, should be a massive priority, for
Yeah.
what in everything we do. So good
Mhm.
on you, Dale, for leading this discussion.
Thank you, sir. I really enjoyed our very adult conversation personally. Yeah, so I think that's gonna end it. It was
All
a
right,
little toyed hour. I think my kid's awake from her nap, so I'm
there you go.
gonna
My kids are definitely awake. They don't nap
stop the
anymore.
recording. And yeah, so thanks for joining us. I don't want to get you guys all bonered up for having an episode every week, but this is just the way Patrick's timeline worked out. So maybe
There
I
you go.
will.
All right, buddy. Thanks for
Fingers
having me.
crossed. Yep.